Hi everyone, this is Candace Cubito for scrapbookpal.com. Lawn Fawn has done it. It has created a really terrific die set called the Magic Iris. Now, the iris of an eye controls the size of the pupil by the amount of light it lets in, much like the shutter of a camera. And this die set creates what I think of more as a shutter for the camera. Here is one of my cards. Now, I've made several cards over the past few days because I've been a bit obsessed about this. I've learned some tips and I will pass them on to you. Let me show you how this works. See my poor little whale who's obviously running a fever? The card says, "Get well soon." And when I pull the arm down, the whale appears completely well. See? The iris or shutter opens and closes. So very clever. I'm going to show you how to make this card, but first I'm going to show you the basics of how to make the iris. Here's the Magic Iris die set. It contains 6 pieces. The largest of them is the ring, and you will need to cut out 3 of them to complete the iris, but then 1 more to decorate it. This piece right here I've heard called a few different things. One, I've heard it called a banana because it looks like a banana when it's hanging. I've also heard it called a sausage because that's what it looks like to many people. I guess it does. But when I first saw it, I thought of it as the smile of a clown. In the shutter of a camera, there are pieces that open and close to allow you to take a picture. Those pieces are called blades. So that's what I'm calling it. This is the blade. Notice that there is an X on it. I'll tell you more about it later. You'll need to cut out 3 blades. This is the arm that opens and closes the iris. You'll need 1 of these. This piece right here is the tab that goes at the end of the arm, and it tells you which way to pull it, and you will need 1 of those. This die right here is a stabilizer. Notice that it's curved at each end. This will help hold the whole iris in place, and you are going to need 3 of these. I'll put them right off to the side over here on the left. This last die is a bit strange looking. I'm going to call it a Whirligig. I've heard it called several things, but really what it is a slot maker. If you look at those arms, you'll see that it's going to cut 3 slots in one of the circles. And if you look at the little protrusions, you will see that they will make little stitch marks, and they're there to show you where to put the stabilizers. I'm going to move the grid paper aside so you can see this more clearly. The Whirligig sets right in the middle of the circle. I'm going to tape it to hold it in place. I'll cut it out and be right back. Here it is. These slots are what the blade tabs will go into. I want you to notice that there is a front and back to this. These slots look like they are going clockwise. If you turn it over, they look counterclockwise. So if you drop it, you can remember which way right way up is. Now, ask me how I know. Blade tabs slide into the slots. They can be a little fiddly, but it becomes easier the more cards you make. First 2 blade tabs settled in nicely, and as if on cue, the third one was a little more difficult, but it eventually went in. Here are the X's I mentioned earlier. The little glue dots go over them. Use glue dots that aren't much bigger than the X's themselves. You can use glue, but it'll take longer to dry. It's a long video, so I'll be back when the glue dots are all on. All right, the glue dots are on, and now I want to get the blades recentered along the bottom circle. Another circle will be placed atop it. I found that it's easier to do if I hold the blades down with one hand while I align the second circle atop it. Once the top circle is on, I'll settle the blades again. Now I flip it over. These little tabs here at some point will be folded over. You can do it now or after the iris is complete. The only reason to do it is so they won't stick out after your iris is atop your card. They won't interfere with the function of the iris. Now onto the tabs. I'm going to label them A, B, and C. You don't have to do that, but I want to show you something. I'm going to put some glue runner straight down from the top of the ring to the bottom along the stitched positioner lines and set tab A on it right up against the inner ring. To do the same thing with tab B. Here's where I want to stop. There were times when I couldn't get my blades of my iris to close completely, and I was very frustrated. But I discovered that instead of putting the tape runner and stabilizer on that dotted line, if I moved them over to the left just a little bit, the iris would close completely. It's such a small adjustment, but it made a big difference. Notice that once you turn over the rings, tab C will now be to the right of tab A. I put tape along the length of the stabilizers, but you can do it after you add the arm. Either way works. You have to put the arm to the right of stabilizer A. Put it close enough to form an inverted V in the space between the two of them. This is the time for a strong adhesive. I tried tape runner and liquid glue, but they didn't hold the arm for long. The arm takes a lot of stress, so use strong glue like score tape. Put the tape less than halfway down the arm on the end that will be placed on the circle. I like to burnish my tape down before I remove the protective cover. When I place the arm on, I press firmly so it makes good contact with the circle. Now I need another ring to place atop the other two. I lay it down carefully, and next I gently fold over the taped stabilizers. Now the operative word is gently, a little loosely. If you make it a tight fit, the iris won't open and close smoothly, if at all. There you have it, an iris that is ready to be used on your card. When you go to test it, it might be a little difficult to open and close because it works best with another ring on top of it, the one you decorate, and on a card base. But you can see that mine is opening and closing beautifully. Look how tightly it closes up. Before I show you how I completed my whale card, I want you to notice my magic iris. I made mine from the reverse side of patterned paper. I discovered that 110-pound cardstock was too thick, especially for the stabilizers. The patterned paper is more like lightweight cardstock and a good choice for the iris. And it gets covered up at the end anyway. I have stacks of patterned paper that I don't use very often, so this is a good way to put it to use. Okay, so on to the whale card. This 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel was decorated using a cloud stencil and Distress Ink's Tumbled glass. I cut out an extra ring and stenciled clouds onto that as well. I adhered the ring atop the magic iris. This doesn't interfere with its opening and closing, so I could liberally put tape on it. However, since I've added clouds to the top ring, I want to make sure I face it in the correct position. Next, I need to place the iris on the card so that when it closes, the arm doesn't stick out beyond the card. Once I've decided on its best position, I lightly pencil in parts of my circle. When you cut out the rings, you also cut out a circle from the center, and I use that circle in the card. I want to put the C in the bottom of the circle, so I'm using Salty Ocean and lightly putting in a horizon line. Then I add a touch more for sky. Then I glue the circle onto the panel. Now I glue the arrow piece onto the arm. I had a pretty blue cardstock scrap, so I used it. Some people put the iris on the panel first, but I find it too difficult. You'll decide what's best for you, though. I need to adhere the iris onto the panel, so I put my very strong adhesive onto just the stabilizers and position it firmly into place. I'm going to decorate the rest of the panel now. I have 3 waves that I want to color. I made them by die cutting Lawn Fawn's puffy clouds, but instead of using the cloud parts of them, I used the other part of the cuts. When I turned them upside down, they look like waves. The wave in the forefront is being colored with tumbled glass. The middle one is being colored with peacock feathers, and the last one, the one in the back, is colored with salty ocean. I'm adhering them by just taping the bottom parts of them together. I need to add some elements into the waves and need to leave room for that. I like the idea of having the waves go partly over the iris. I tried putting the waves completely below it, but the panel looked too disjointed. The water inside the iris is also colored with salty ocean, and by decorating this way, it brings the 2 colors closer together. To raise up the waves, I put mounting tape near the sides and bottom of the panel. Then I adhered the waves and cut off the extra. I have to bring down the top wave to make it fit properly. My whales came from a cute little stamp set called Get Well Before and Afters by Lawn Fawn. I'm going to speed this up a bit, so I'm just going to tell you how I colored the whales. I used my Copic markers, C5, C3, and N2. For the ice bag, I used R37, R29, and R27. And for the top of the ice bag, I used E35 and E34. Now, the assorted fish came from my stash. I'm going to add a little music while I finish up this card. Here is my finished card. I added some clouds to the top for a couple of reasons. 1, I thought the added elements looked good. And 2, because the stabilizers need to be folded gently, sometimes they stick out a bit and the clouds hide them. The last thing I added was some seaweed. That added a little more interest and a little more color to a card that had lots of blue. Now I want to show you another card. I'm starting with my magic iris already made. Lawn Fawn has 2 add-ons for this die set, and here is one of them. It's called the Scalloped add-on. It comes with the large scallop and a tab for the arm. If you look closely, you can see that the scallop has cross-stitching at the inner ring, so the small circle it makes has that cross-stitch design. The tab is plain except for the arrow. You can use the tab interchangeably with the other die of the original die set. You can use the other circle as well. I've already placed the arrow tab onto the arm, and here's the scallop that I'm adding to the top. I'll leave the iris open and show you my background. This is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel that I've embossed with the words Happy Birthday all over it. I'm checking to make sure of my placement. The arm should be fully within the card so that it will fit into an A2 envelope. There's a problem later on, but I'll fix it. You'll see. After much testing, I've decided that this is the best spot to put the iris, so as before, I mark the spot where the center circle will go. I've used a darker yellow circle. Actually, it's the reverse side of the polka dot pattern paper I used for the scallop, and I've stamped It's Your Day from one of Concord and Nine's turnabout stamp sets called Hello Sunshine. I adhere the circle to the panel and glue the panel to an A2 card base. There, that's done. Now I'm adhering the iris to the card. As before, I'm using very strong tape and only putting it on the stabilizers. I burnish the tape to make it adhere better and let the cover paper come off easier. When I put the magic iris on the card, I'm disappointed that I've made an error. I thought I tested it well enough to make sure that the arm won't come above the card so that it would fit into an A2 envelope, but it does. My solution is to simply cut off a bit of the bottom to accommodate the top. This scalloped iris reminds me of a flower, so I decided to turn it into one. To do this, I have to color the blades. I'm using Copic's YR16. It takes just a few minutes. Had I thought about it beforehand, I would have colored the blades first, or have chosen a colored cardstock before I cut the blades. I cut off the bottom before I continued coloring the flower center. Then I add color dots all over the center. Take a look at what you have and use them. I used YR24, YR16, E97, and E37. I'm in my room, I'm listening to music by myself, relaxing. This isn't a problem for me at all to spend a few minutes adding those dots. Now it's time to finish up the card. I'm using the Happy Birthday greeting from Lawn Fawn's Wavy Sayings. I made extra the last time I used the Stampin' Dies, so I have one ready. I didn't have any leaf stamps that were the right size for the flower, so I made my own. I drew them with Copic Color Friendly pen and colored them with YG07, G14, and YG17. I cut them down so they wouldn't interfere with the opening and closing of the magic iris. Last, I added some clear beads to represent dew. Here's my finished card and another one similar to it that I made earlier. And of course, here's my Get Well Soon card. I also made another one. Because I said the magic iris reminded me of a camera shutter, I couldn't resist making a camera card. I like the idea of putting a picture of the recipient in the center, but I didn't want to put a photo of anyone in this video. I'll show you close-ups of the cards at the end of this video. Now, I told you that Lawn Fawn has another add-on to the Magic Iris die set, so I have another video on that. Look for it. Have a good day, and bye for now.